Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 56 of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Ersman, and I will be your host today for another episode that I'm really looking forward to sharing with you. So a few weeks ago now, I got a chance to sit down and talk with Bruce Enns. Bruce is the new General Director of Multiply, our MB mission agency who sends missionaries around the world and also does a lot of really great church planning efforts. Bruce took over in this role literally just a few weeks before I had a chance to talk to him, so he is still new, but he's been around in the MB family for a long time. And many of you probably know that Multiply is a great organization, but they have had a lot of challenges in the recent years, and I appreciated how Bruce openly addressed those, but he really has a lot of great vision for things to come down the road, and I'm excited to see what comes under his leadership, and I think you're really going to enjoy getting to know Bruce. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll get right to my conversation with Bruce Enns, the new General Director of Multiply.
The Christian Leader serves U.S. Mennonite brethren by drawing our churches together, discipling the USMB constituency within the Confession of Faith, and directing the USMB family toward a unified vision. This summer, Christian Leader coverage will highlight the ICOM 2022 Summit in Brazil, a Mennonite World Conference Assembly report from Indonesia, recaps from Ascent and USMB Gathering 2022, continuing reports from Ukraine, and more. The CL is free for all U.S. Mennonite brethren. Subscribe today at www.christianleadermag.com.
All right, my friends. Well, today I'm excited to introduce you to Bruce Enns. He is the new General Director of Multiply. Many of you may know him from his years in the MB circles, but if you don't yet, wanted to get a chance for you to get to know him and kind of hear about his new role and kind of his vision for Multiply here on moving forward. So, Bruce, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Really grateful to meet you.
Thank you, Matt. It's really good to be with you and just to be speaking to the audience in our family of churches in the U.S.
Yeah, it's great to get to know you. So I admitted before we started recording here that I'm a stereotypical dumb American who doesn't know Canadian geography, but I know you're in Saskatchewan. So tell us about you and your home, your family. Tell us just where you're talking to us from today and any background you want to share.
Yeah, no problem. Well, I'm living in Saskatchewan, kind of in the middle of the country. We're in a farm belt here, much like Kansas area. I think where you're sitting from, and so that's where we are. And I'm based in my home office right now. So, and I grew up in a farm as well too. I grew up in a small farming community in northeastern Saskatchewan called Carrot River, Saskatchewan, which most Canadians have never heard of. I don't expect any Americans to actually have heard of that place. But anyways, so it was a great place to grow up, and I love growing up on the farm. Married for 33 years to my wife, Lisa, and we have 4 adult daughters. They're ages 20 to 28, and they all still live here in Saskatoon. Only our youngest lives at home with us yet. And so we're just really enjoying this adult stage of life with our kids right now.
And I have to say, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan might be the coolest name ever. Like it's a little bit sounds like a Dr. Seuss book, but it sounds like the place I'd like to live. So I love it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful. I keep forgetting that until I run, go out to other places, and then it's like, oh yeah, it is a bit of a mouthful, but we're kind of used to it, I guess. So
yeah, I love it. Very cool. Yeah. Well, we just mentioned that you just recently started as the new General Director. Is that the right title, General Director?
Yeah.
And so we're recording kind of end of May. You just started a couple weeks ago. So I know this is kind of fresh for you. Really quick, can you just explain what does General Director of Multiply mean? What is your new role? How does that fit in with the big picture of Multiply?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm still trying to figure that out. So as one person explained it to me, the General Director leads generally and directs generally, I guess. And so that's part of what I feel like I'm called to do. And so I'm looking forward to that. And, but yeah, these first weeks and months are just really figuring out the organization, the culture, and getting to a sense of what Multiply is all about in its current kind of edition, and what God's doing currently and moving the organization towards. But yeah, just oversee all the ministries that originate and are connected to our US and Canadian, supporting conferences that birthed Multiply many, many years ago. So
Very
I'll
cool.
have a better answer for your question in a few months from now, probably.
I think you're the grand poobah. You're the grand poobah from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Now
Oh,
there's a
there
Dr.
you
Seuss book if we ever had one. So
go.
okay. So
Yeah.
yeah, we just recently had an article about you in the Christian Leader. I was reading it earlier. So I know you've been in the NB family for a long time. You're a pastor. You've been on the board. So fill us in on that background. So you were a pastor on the board. What all did that look like? What other roles did you have over the years?
Yeah. I mean, I can go back a little bit further. I'll go back to some of my beginnings a little bit, like even within the MB family. I was at Columbia Bible College. I was a student there. Actually, that's where my wife and I met. We were both students at Columbia Bible College in Abbotsford, BC. Both of us coming from Saskatchewan, actually, but we met over there. And so my background, even though I got a church ministries degree from Columbia, my background was more, as I moved forward, into coaching and athletics and recreation. So I
Okay.
was actually a hockey coach and athletics director at Columbia for many years after I was a student there. And so I kind of continued on and pursued that, as well as kinesiology degree. And then I eventually did a master's in kind of sport organizations, or nonprofit governance, actually, is what my master's was in. And so it's really interesting. And God uses all that kind of stuff and carries it forward in our lives, which I always find so interesting. And I really enjoy just seeing how God uses those things. But God kind of called us out of that season at Columbia, and it was about 23 years ago, I started getting this restlessness that it was time to leave, and resigned from that position with no job to go to, and went to Calgary, and kind of, that was sort of I call it the wandering in the wilderness kind of phase for a while. But then eventually God led us to this call to pastoral ministry, and we moved to Saskatoon, and we're involved at Forest Grove Community Church for the last 21 years, been pastoring there. And even though I kind of came into the role reluctantly, not wanting it, I didn't want to be a pastor, didn't want to move back home in a sense of where I was originally from. And yet God had these things in store for me. And it turned out to be a role that I came to embrace and truly love, even though it was definitely hard to kind of figure out my identity. Who am I as a pastor now in this kind of new era? But came to really love pastoral ministry and church ministry, and it's become a real passion of mine. So I started out as a youth and young adults pastor in that role, and then about 4 years in, the lead pastor and I switched roles, actually by his initiative. He became an associate pastor, I became the lead pastor, and that's a whole nother story in itself. But just his self-awareness, and he just saw some gifts in me, and so that was a really kind of cool part of my story during that time. But through that, I really came to just love the local church. And I over these last years, it just sort of, one of my disciplines is, even as I drive by local churches and their buildings, I pray blessing over them. And I do that in whatever city I'm in. God has just given me a real love for the local church. And so even this role in Multiply is one that I see as an extension of that. And so when I was on the board of Multiply, it was MB Mission at that time. I was on the board for 12 years, from 2006, I believe it was, till 2018. And what I loved about that role was it allowed me to lift my eyes. Like, it was God lifting my eyes to see the bigger world and the global family. And when you're a local church pastor, you can get so drilled down into the weeds of everyday life and the mess of people's lives and so on. And so my work on the board with MB Mission at the time was just so invigorating and encouraging to me, because it helped me to see beyond kind of the immediate issues that were right in front of me. And so that's what I really loved about that role. And it just helped me to really get exposed to Multiply. And our church has had a lot of involvement with long-term missions and global partnerships. And so we've been really connected through Multiply in that way as well. And so that was just some of my past history in that, and from connecting a local church pastor role to being involved in global missions as well.
So on that topic, so I mean, going from hockey coach, you said, to pastor, that's already a pretty big jump. But then to go even more specifically into missions, that's a kind of very specific call into ministry. So I'm just curious, did that kind of just evolve over time? Have you always kind of had a heart for the world, or how did you get specifically into the mission part of the side of things?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, because our church was very involved in global missions, I was introduced to and connected to a lot of global missionaries through Multiply and other agencies. But then our church also, we developed a partnership. We made a decision early on to move from kind of a wide, you might call it a shotgun approach, to more of a rifle approach, a focused approach on partnerships. And our first one being in Panama. And so for the last 17 years, we've done that. And I guess what I've just seen is the intentionality of kind of pressing into one location actually just made global missions a much more integral part of our discipleship strategy overall as a church. So now we just saw training up teams and training up individuals to go both on short-term missions right in our own city, and then going beyond to the global places was something that was just really, really powerful and impactful. So it really just started to grow as God kind of planted these seeds and these desires in lots of people in our church to connect more intentionally globally, and specifically to connect in one place and really invest in one place. And what we found is that by investing in one place, it actually helped people even look to other missionaries and say, hey, how could we do a better job of supporting them? And so it actually expanded the reach, ironically, of our church in that way by focusing more narrowly. And so I would just say it was just something that God just started to grow in me over time. And Marianne Berg is our missions pastor. She's just done a great job of helping us to see and to engage with these global partnerships. And so just being a part of that has just been really exciting and grown that love for the global church. And then as I've gotten to meet people and make friends in our global family, it's just only enriched my life, and it's changed our church. And so for us, it's just, it became part of an integral part of our discipleship strategy, and something that I've just loved being a part of.
Very cool. Okay. So you kind of have that role, and then you're on the board. So we'll maybe get into this in just a little bit later, but Multiply's obviously been in kind of a lot of transition. There's been a lot of change the past few years. So I'm just curious, when some of those things started happening, you're on the board, like, was this on your radar at all? Or how did you get from there to here? What's kind of the next step of your story after that?
Well, I would say that the last couple of years when I was pastoring at Forest Grove, I started to feel a bit of this restlessness again. I don't know how else to describe it. I just kind of call it this restlessness from God. I just feel like the Spirit of God is just prompting me to, okay, it's sort of preparing you for change. Mm-hmm. And similar to what happened like 20 some years ago at Columbia Bible College. And so for the last couple of years, this restlessness was there, and I was sort of kind of working through that. And I was just sensing, I think God is preparing me to leave, this pastoral role that I love. And then, COVID hits, and that's just upended everybody's life. And so you sort of, for me, it was sort of like, okay, head down and go time. And you sort of, it's not the time to leave now. So you sort of press in and keep going. And yet, Lisa and I eventually just kind of landed in a place that it was time to resign, and just felt like, no, I think now is the time. And so that's decision that we made last summer. And also for me, I'd gone through a little bit of a season of burnout there as well too. I mean, I know that people all over the place, including pastors, they're under lots of strain, and COVID just added all kinds of weight to that. And so that was part of my experience as well too. And so, but that wasn't the main factor. The main factor is just feeling this sense like, no, it's time to move on. And so that was just affirmed. And so I had some people talk to me about the Multiply role at, different points in this season. And I, Randy Friesen is a good friend of mine. And I just felt like, no, I wasn't sure. I didn't feel like the right fit. I didn't feel like I was in a place that I was ready to step into something like that. But eventually, Lisa and I came to this place of peace of resigning. And so last October is when I finished my time, and then just took about 4 to 6 months of just what I call disconnecting and decompressing, and just totally stepping away from leadership responsibilities, and just allowing the Spirit of God to bring us, my wife and I, both through just a time of healing and renewal. And we had to go through grieving and all kinds of things of leaving a church that we love, and so on. And so I needed a lot of time to process things again. And so that's what these last months have been about for me. And I've really loved that. I'm a woodworker, and I love to work with my hands. And so I was in my workshop a lot and building, and I probably spent more time in silent prayer and just walking in nature and allowing God to speak to me than I have in most of my life. So it's just been a really good season of that. The board approached me again after Christmas, or they approached me after Christmas, I should say, and just to consider, would I discuss this opportunity again? And so I just felt like I was in a different place, and that was ready to kind of engage in that discernment. And so we entered into a really slow two-way discernment. It was about 4 months actually of discernment from January till April or so, and just really came to a place of peace, and even for Lisa and I, just of unity, that this felt like a right fit now. And I've always been one where I really value, I mean, the Holy Spirit lives within us, but the Holy Spirit is also among us as a body of believers. And I really value how the Holy Spirit speaks to his people and among us. And so just discerning with different people, and discerning obviously with the multiplied board and so on, just really felt a sense of affirmation and peace and of God's calling to kind of step into this role. And so that's kind of what led me to agree to go into this discernment and eventually land in a place where I'm really excited for what God has for the future.
Yeah, cool. That's great. And speaking of that, so I mean, this is a huge transition for you, right? I mean, anytime you leave a church, leave a job that you've been at for a long time, a job that you mostly enjoyed, it sounds like, and it's a similar job, but at the same time, it's also pretty different. So as we mentioned, you're literally just days into this new position.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned you were just in Brazil, right? So in these kind of early days, with a kind of unique perspective of, you've been around, but you also have this kind of new perspective. I'm guessing some real excitement, especially in these first few days. So now that you're kind of in and getting settled, what are you seeing, like, just beyond the horizon that really excites you? Like how are you feeling about just what's next for Multiply?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I just came back from Brazil, ICOM meetings, International Community of the Mennonite Brethren. And so our MB family, our global family from around the world. And it was the first ICOM meeting I'd been to. And I know, lots of different people have been to those, and they're just really encouraging and exciting to, again, lift your eyes to see what God is doing beyond our own country, beyond our own city and our own setting. And so that was really exciting for me, just to be a part of it. And I think a great way to kind of enter into this role. And I guess for me, it was also really cool to just see how Multiply has been a really big part of this ICOM story. Like, Multiply has been a significant part over the last 100+ years of helping, make disciples, plant churches. They eventually become conferences, and then they, at whatever point, join together to form ICOM. And so Multiply has been a big part of that story, but now I think needs to play a different story in different ways. And so, as I think about Multiply, and I think about over 100 years of people giving of their money sacrificially, of sending people, of going, of serving as missionaries and in all kinds of capacities, whether it's on the boards or whatever, I just am honored to kind of join into that story and to be a part of declaring God's goodness to the world that we're called to. But the other reality is that we also see, and even just being in ICOM, you hear stories from different countries. You see that it's always amazing, and we all experience this, where you see God's transformation and good things that are happening, and it's really exciting, and there's great stuff. But then alongside that are stories of pain and disappointment and brokenness, and those two things just seem to go hand in hand in all of our churches. They go hand in hand in all of our conferences. They go hand in hand, in our global families that we see around the world. And so the same is true for Multiply. Multiply has had pain points over the years, last couple of years, with the merger and demerger of C2C and MB Mission. There's definitely, some good things that happened prior to and through that, but there was also some real painful things and difficult things. And the story was different in Canada than it was in the US. And so I'm more familiar with the Canadian side of the story, obviously, but I am somewhat familiar with the US side, and I'm, wanting to get to know more of that story as well. But I guess, just seeing what God can do even in our brokenness is always been encouraging to me. One of the things that, God really put on my heart early on when I stepped into leadership in church leadership was just a call to a leadership that is only found through brokenness. And I think that's probably true for most of us. And it's part of our Multiply story as well, too, is we have to be honest with the brokenness and the things that have gone wrong, and then work through to forgiveness, reconciliation, and then move forward together in whatever ways that we can. And so I think that that's going to be really important for us in the years ahead.
Yeah, and you mentioned, we don't need to get into details, but you mentioned, it's been a little kind of a rocky road the past few years, and your leadership, I think, will be instrumental in helping turn that around. I know, just from what I've gathered, that one of your goals is to really help the U.S. and the Canadian teams work together really well, kind of shore up communication, shore up teamwork, some things that maybe kind of weren't strengths over the past few years. I'm kind of gathering that you're really, that's really important to you, to kind of take the reins and kind of repair some of those relationships, maybe gain back some trust where that might need to happen. So is that true? Is that kind of at the top of your list these days, is trying to shore those things up, and in your first few days, making sure that we can have those strong relationships together?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my leadership style is I'm very relational, and so for me, relationships are really important. And so, maybe that's the pastor shepherd part of me. I mean, I have also an apostolic kind of gifting and so on, but I tell people it's kind of a slow apostolic. I like to go, like, we need to go together, and that means we need to walk slowly and make sure that we walk together. And so, yeah, this season is about relationship building. It's about getting to know people, reacquainting myself with old friends, and getting to know new friends and people that I've never met before. And that's especially true in the U.S. I have lots more people, obviously, to get to know in the U.S. And so, looking forward to coming to the gathering, the national convention, and the pastors retreat in Kansas at the end of July. Yep. And have already some trips planned in California in September, and there'll be other places that I'll connect. But just really wanting to do that. And one of the things that I'm excited about is I know that the US MB executive, along with the Canadian executive, they've been working through some stuff in these last months of their own reconciliation, and that's really exciting to me, because the question, I think, for some people was, okay, do we even want to stay together, as Canada and US? And the resounding answer out of all that conversation and dialogue, as they worked through what I understand was some really tough stuff, was a resounding yes. It's like, yes, we are committed to each other. We want to work together. We're stronger together. And I just really affirm that. And I was excited to hear that. And so that's what I want to be a part of, is doing that. And one of my favorite parables that Jesus told is, in Matthew 13, where he talks about the parable of the well, it's called, in my Bible, it has the title, the parable of the sower and the seed or something. Mm-hmm. And I like to call it the parable of the soil, because it's all about the different types of soil and how the good soil produces, the 30, 60, 100-fold thing. And so for me, that's always been really important, is what's the condition of the soil, and what's the condition of the soil in my own life, like in my own heart. And am I tending to that? What's the condition of the soil in my marriage, if I'm married? If I have a family, what's the condition of the soil with my kids and my relationship there? What's the condition of the soil in my relationships around me, in our church, in the teams that we serve in or lead? Those kinds of things are really, really important to me, because when I see that parable, and when I read scripture, even where Paul says, like, he's talking about him and Apollos. Well, one does the watering, one plants a seed, one does the watering, but it's only God that makes it grow, in 1 Corinthians 3. And so that really sticks out to me, that God is the only one who can make things grow, but we do have a responsibility to tend to the environment and the culture, the conditions of the soil, all those kinds of things. So that's the kind of stuff I'm really interested in paying attention to and helping process with people, because I think when we're healthy, things grow and things happen and good fruit is produced. And so it's just really important that we pay attention to those things.
That's great. And kind of building off of that, you mentioned kind of the higher level, executive level, like USMB and the Canadian leadership kind of working together. I'm curious, do you have anything specific in mind for the local MB church? So if a leader's listening today who works at a local church, they're not involved in the top level exec level, but I'm guessing, their annual budget, I'm sure some of that goes to Multiply. They might host you or an MB or a Multiply missionary occasionally throughout the year. How else can just the local church, the local MB church work for some of these kind of bigger picture goals? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I guess this is where I want people to hear, this is what my passion is. I mean, I was a local church pastor for 21 years. So I get that world. I understand the realities of that. And so for me, as I think about even my role now, Multiply, what my passion is not so much to go to churches and say, hey, look at the great thing that we're doing, come and join us. It's actually more so to go alongside pastors and say, hey, tell me what you're doing. Tell me what God has planted in your church, and kind of the bigger vision and the seeds of kind of the mission DNA that God has put in your church. Because I'm just one who really believes that God has put all the gifts that are needed in that local church. God has put a DNA, kind of something unique to that church, that this is your part of the kingdom work that you're called to do. And so I think for a leader's role, I think our role is more to kind of draw that out and to tease that out of people and organizations in a church, and not so much, even when it comes to vision, like I don't think of it as like, okay, well, here's my vision for this, but it's more like, what is the church's vision? And so I think Multiply, what I would like to see Multiply continue to do, and even maybe do more of, is just coming alongside the church and just saying, hey, help me understand what your vision is, and what can we do together, and how can we connect you with other churches that have similar vision? And then we're not working in isolation and alone, but we're actually working together. Yeah. So I just would love to see local churches getting engaged, and in part by just being able to articulate and share some of their vision. And I'm going to be asking lots of those questions to pastors as I talk to them.
Yeah, cool. I like that a lot. Okay, and then speaking of vision, so another question I had. So I know during the whole C2C, that whole chapter, there's a lot of conversation about how does church planting fit into mission, right? So I think the Multiply tagline or whatever is that the world may know Jesus, right? And obviously the US and Canada are part of the world. So how do you see the future of missions and church planting? How can they work together? And is there going to be more effort for kind of US and Canada based stuff as part of Multiply? Or how do you see those things playing together moving forward?
Well, at the start of that tagline is the word together, together that the world may know, right?
Yeah.
And so that word together is really important to me. And so that means, like, for me, that means all kinds of things. Like, it means, Canada and US too, as kind of the founding and the supporting conferences of Multiply. And they're the ones who said, hey, we need a missions agency that helps us do this, and so that's what Multiply is there to do, is to serve the church in North America, but also together in the sense of connecting our North American missionaries to national leaders on the front lines. And so church planting is definitely a huge focus and a priority for us, but church planting comes out of really good disciple making and discipleship. So we have to have a culture, again, that soil. You have to have the soil and the culture of discipleship and disciple making. And then as that multiplies, then churches form out of that. And so those two, again, go hand in hand. But I think, the local church is critical because and this is where there's the local church, there's the long-term or the North American missionaries, and then there's the national leaders. And I've heard some people say, well, are we not about the long-term missionaries anymore and just about national leaders, or vice versa? And my answer is, well, no, both are actually critically important. In fact, I would say all three are critically important, and the three being the local church in North America, and then the North American missionaries that get sent out there, and then the national leaders in whatever country that we're serving in. Those three need to be working together really, really closely. And Multiply just plays a role in I think, facilitating some of that. But the North American missionaries are critical because they're I would call them the cultural interpreters in both directions. Back to the local church and also into the other contexts. And they train and coach and raise up and hold accountable, national leaders, and help those national leaders and what they're doing get connected back to the local churches here. And that's why all of those things kind of have to work simultaneously in order to function well. So I don't know, did that answer your question, or
yeah.
If I went off on a tangent?
No. That makes a lot of sense. I think you're right that they're all very interconnected and they're all necessary. Yeah. So that makes sense. You have to focus on all those things. And along with that, I wrote a note earlier. You mentioned something about the shotgun or the rifle approach. And I think that's something that I think we all struggle with in ministry to some degree. Like, how much do you do a little bit everywhere, and how much do you really dig in deep and kind of focus on one specific area? So I guess for Multiply in general, and I'm just curious for your opinion and your experience from a local church, for a local church specifically, is there a better way to do missions? Would you say it's better to go all in on Uganda, or is it better to do a little bit across the world? Or how do you kind of balance the shotgun and rifle approach?
Now you're getting my own personal opinion here. I don't know if I'm speaking officially for Multiply. I'll just speak for me because I'm a local church pastor. So, sure. And this comes from our own experience in our context. One of as we kind of narrowed our focus and we defined partnerships in our church context really, really specifically. In fact, we have a written covenant and we develop it together with, like I'll use Panama example because that was the first partnership that we developed. So we developed it with the national leaders in that setting and also the missionaries, the multiply missionaries, all were involved. It's a mutual two-way kind of thing. And so we developed it and partnership means something very tangible to us. And so some people critiqued that and said, well, okay, if you just focus there, what about all our other missionaries? What was interesting is we found, and our other missionaries from our church would attest to that. In fact, they told us that as we as a church focused in more narrowly in one kind of setting and tried to do one thing really well, what happened is other people in the church kind of sat up and went, hey, well, we're doing this for Panama. What if we did some similar things for so-and-so over in this other country? And so a small group would suddenly get involved with a long-term missionary who they'd never been involved with before, but they suddenly thought, hey, maybe we can do something really specific with this one missionary. So suddenly a small group is really connecting and supporting and communicating and praying for this missionary and the work that they're doing. So what we found was by focusing more narrowly, actually everybody sort of got more attention and it actually helped the whole, which was a really interesting thing that we didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
And so my personal bent is I think as churches, as a local church, you're better off focusing more narrowly than you are too broadly. Because even by doing that, you'll do fewer things well.
Yeah.
And then you'll really invest and engage. But then you'll also help your people to look beyond even the things that they might have interest in, and they'll do some of their own stuff. And they'll do that more well too, because they'll focus more narrowly and then everybody's doing that better. So I personally feel like that's a better approach than just being really broad and really wide.
Yeah.
Because it also comes back to the fact of it's about relationship. And so your family together, as you connect with these people in other places around the globe, and you grow to love each other. And so you want to spend time together, and that relationships take time. So you can't do that with a whole bunch of different settings. Right. So if you can narrow your focus, I think you can just do it much more effectively.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's kind of pros and cons to both ways, but I think like you're saying, like if you gave every missionary in the world $20, or if you gave one missionary 50,000, you're going to get a better return for your investment if you go all in on one specific place. Again, there's pros and cons to both models, but I think there's definitely something to say about being more focused like that. I like that a lot. So I'm curious, since you're taking over kind of right now, hopefully, I hope you're in leadership for many, many years. I'm sure you hope that as well. Missions already has changed a lot, right? Over the past several, I don't know, however many decades or even centuries, missions evolves as the world evolves, as culture evolves. And I think most of us would say that it feels like the world's getting smaller, right? A lot of us probably have friends on the other side of the world, and worldwide travel is getting easier and easier, at least most of the time when we're not in a pandemic or whatever. So I'm just curious, how do you see missions changing right now? How does it look different now than before? And do you see it continuing to evolve over time? If you were to kind of guess where things are headed, what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I just have so much to learn in this area. I feel like I probably am not the right person to ask, but I mean, I guess some of the things that I'm seeing and I'm excited about is, the world is coming to us and the world is going everywhere. Like, so it's not like missions is not about the North American church just sending missionaries, to the rest of the world. We need to keep doing that, but we also need to recognize that the world is coming to us. And so we've seen that even with, refugee sponsorship. We've seen that with people with immigration, with people coming into our countries. And so suddenly we have all kinds of languages and ethnic groups and different types of people all among us. And so, some countries are starting to send missionaries now to us in Canada and the US, which is really exciting and helping us. So I think the posture of mutuality and of being, of wanting to enter into relationship is what is so critical. Because when you do that, you actually do God's mission work together in both settings, if you're thinking of two settings kind of thing. And so it's not just us going and serving there, but it's also us receiving. And so again, in our context in the church that I was pastoring, we said so many times, like we have been blessed more than we have blessed others. Like it's changed us. We've been so encouraged in our faith and we've tried to encourage others in their faith. And so the mutuality thing is, I think, a really important piece, as opposed to just sort of this, sending off and bringing our cultures and our ideas and our ways of doing things to other places, but rather going with humility, a posture of humility to learn and to say, hey, we have lots to learn from you. And then also receiving people into our context who can teach us as well. And so when we get to that place where we're discipling one another and learning from each other in humility, really beautiful things can happen in whatever context, whatever country it is or whatever. So I think that's going to happen more and more and more. And so that's exciting to me. And again, like people with business interests and all kinds of other things, there's so many different backgrounds that can be utilized in different cultures and contexts that I think it's and that's been happening for years. That's not new, but I think that the opportunities for those things are just going to continue to be there and to increase. So again, I'll have lots of insight into that question over the months and years ahead as people teach me about what it looks like. And I'm excited to learn along with people.
I think a lot of people feel like there's, at least in America, I'm not sure if this is how it feels in Canada and elsewhere in the world, but some people feel there is just kind of this hostility towards Christianity, at least in some circles, right? But it also seems to me the world is broken, the world is hurting. And at the same time, I think people are more open to whatever will give them hope, whatever will help them kind of get through each day. And also at the same time, I think it's interesting. I know that one of Multiply's really key goals is to honor the local leaders, honor the local culture, not try to take over and North Americanize everything, but honor their culture. But at the same time, as the worldwide culture it kind of becomes more and more similar, they're more and more aware of our pop culture. We probably know more about their culture than we did 50, 100 years ago. So I'm just curious, to me, it kind of seems like this might be a unique kind of special time for missions where there's the blending of culture, the kind of darkness that we've seen over the past few years might lead to a more openness to conversation. I mean, are you kind of seeing that even in your first few days, or how are you kind of sensing the world temperature these days?
No, I think so. I think what we all experience in COVID is the polarization of culture, right? Like people just seem to sort of like, wow, like the extremes just got more extreme and the divides just got bigger.
Yep.
And I think as we actually get together with one another and we start talking and we actually learn how to listen to each other. And this is what I love about the whole idea of what it means to be a missionary. I mean, we all have to, I think, have that posture all the time, even within our own churches on a Sunday morning.
Yep.
Is just, and what a missionary does, from what I understand, is you go into a context that you don't really know. You go in with a posture of humility. You go in there to learn, to listen, to observe, to understand the language, the culture, the nuances, their theology, how they view God, or and all those kinds of things. And then you proclaim and bring the truth of God's great story, this gospel story, into that culture in a way that makes sense to them. Yeah. And so I think if we can all have that posture, it just changes things, and it can happen anywhere. I mean, in our church, we're a larger church with a big sanctuary, and I used to, every once in a while, I'd say, okay, this morning I want you to go on a 50-foot missions trip, and basically get up, move from your seat, and go 50 feet from where you are and sit down by, in your unusual place, right? And
right.
We all know how that feels.
Yep.
That's intimidating. But here, you're going into another culture, 50 feet away from where you sit in a sanctuary.
Countercultural ministry right there, yeah.
Totally. But the same principle applies, right? It's like, okay, who are these people now? And how do I get to know them? And so on and so forth. So I guess that's what excites me, is if we can all have a posture of humility and understand God's great story. Like, I mean, God's story is an incredible story of hope. And so we unashamedly and boldly take this gospel story into the world, but we do it with humility, and we help people see how their story fits into God's story. And I think that's what is really beautiful. Like in an age right now where people are confused and even living in fear, and there's so much stuff going on that we don't understand, it's just really important to be reminded that God is in control. God has got an incredible story, and your story makes sense. As you understand God's story, your story fits into this. He's got a place for you here. And so that piece, I think, crosses all cultures, all boundaries, and people are longing for that. And so if we can find ways and postures that help people hear that better, I think there's incredible things that God's going to do through that.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Bruce, even in the little bit of time we've had together, I just appreciate your humility, your heart, your leadership, and just your vision that you have for Multiply. I'm excited to see where things go from here. Really excited just to see, how your leadership grows. And thank you just for taking this role and for even just the heart that I can hear behind you. Our time's gone fast. Is there anything that you want to share with our family that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet?
I don't think so. No, thank you, Matt. I really appreciate this opportunity. I would just say I'm really looking forward to getting to know our USMB family. And so please talk to me, reach out. I'd love to connect with you where I can, and just to understand more of what God's doing in your setting and how Multiply can play a support to that and connect into that. So that'd be great.
Awesome. Well, it's great to meet you, Bruce. We look forward to seeing you in Kansas City here in July.
Yeah, you bet. We'll see you there.
Right. Okay, there you go. That was the Grand Poobah from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. So many thanks to Bruce again for joining us today, and I hope you feel the same way I do, that there are lots of really good days ahead for Multiply, and I'm excited to see how Bruce leads the organization moving forward. I think there's just lots of good things coming. So we didn't mention this in the episode, but of course, if you'd like to learn more about Multiply, their website is multiply.net. You can learn a lot more and find out ways that you can give and get involved. And we've been mentioning this for several weeks. We would love to have you join us at the convention coming up in July. That'd be a great time to meet Bruce if you haven't had a chance to do that yet. So, of course, you can learn more about that at usmb.org. Okay, well, thanks again so much to you for listening today, wherever you are in the States and Canada or around the world. Grateful for you taking time to listen in this week. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time right here on the Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.